right, Shabbat Shalom. Here we go again. This week's portion of scripture for us is Tzav. Tzav is Vayikra, Leviticus 6:8 through 8:36, and we are. It's the second portion in the book of Vayikra. We'll begin Tzav in chapter 6, and verse 8. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, "Command Aharon and his sons, saying, This is the law of the burnt offering. It is the burnt offering because it is burned on the altar all the night until the morning, and the fire of the altar is kept burning upon it. The Kohen shall put on his long robe of fine linen, and he shall put his linen underpants on his flesh, and he shall take up the ashes which the fire consumed with the burnt offering upon the altar, and shall put them beside the altar, and he shall strip off his garments, and shall put on other garments, and shall bring the ashes out to the outside of the camp to a clean place, and the fire on the altar shall be kept burning upon it. It shall not be put out, and the priest shall burn wood on it morning by morning, and he shall lay the burnt offering in order on it, and he shall burn it as incense with the fat of the peace offering. Fire shall be continually burning on the altar, it shall never go out." So this burnt offering, we are told is to be offered up. It is to be placed upon the altar upon which there is a fire that shall not go out. We've talked a lot leading up to this, and we have talked about how we are the tabernacle of Yahweh. We are his dwelling place. And there is an altar upon which we should have a fire that does not go out. And for some people, when things get to where they are right now in our world, it can do one of two things. It can push some people toward Yahweh, and it can push some people away from Yahweh. Sometimes we can just wish that the world would slow down and that we would have more time to spend with Yahweh, that we would be, we would have more time to be able to study and to invest into the life that he would have us to live. And then sometimes when the world does slow down, we find it really hard to fulfill that desire that we previously had, to spend that little bit more time with him. Especially right now, we can get wrapped up in watching news and house projects, doing everything we can to find a reason to get out. One of the instructions here for the Kohen in this burnt offering is the concept of cleanliness and changing clothes from one place to the next. And we've been pretty spoiled in our society, and now we're coming to a point in a time where we need to actually start caring more for others than we do for ourselves. considering the people around us and their well-being and their health. Especially, with this Wuhan flu, China flu, COVID-19, coronavirus, whatever. And a lot of what we've been told is that, the people that are high risk are going to be ones with underlying health issues and that are, or elderly. And so it's real easy for people to get into the mindset of, well, even if I catch, this virus, it's not going to affect me that negatively. And so really our concern is more for the people that we love and know, and it might not be so much a worry for ourselves, but a worry for the people around us. And that's something that we, I think, in this society have kind of lost touch with, is taking that time to care for others more than ourselves. It's something that, we hear stories and we hear, these awesome stories about people doing something, to take care of someone else. We heard this morning about someone paying for groceries for someone in front of them, and we get these kinds of things often, and it's so wonderful because it's not a common thing. And that's unfortunate. Something that should be so common, it's rare enough that when you hear about it, it's awesome. So, we're supposed to have a fire continually burning upon the altar that resides within the tabernacle that is all of us. And what are we doing to keep this fire burning? What are we doing to kindle this fire on a regular basis? It also says that the Kohen is the one who is supposed to keep it burning, and so perhaps there's a revelation, there's an aspect where, if you start to let the fire dim, if you start to maybe not utilize the altar as much as we should, Yahweh or Yeshua, our Kohen Agadol, will come in and kindle that fire and give us a reason to utilize it, right? If you don't go out and start your barbecue grill a little bit early, it won't be ready for the food that you're going to put on it. If you start it right away and put the food on it, it doesn't work as well. So we're supposed to have a fire kindled within us at all times. And I just want to encourage us for right now to not be discouraged or dismayed or lazy or sluggard, and not to slack any, especially considering we're here. We're at the door, the entrance to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Pesach is right around the corner. And we're looking at, so if we follow the conjunction, Pesach is going to be Monday, April 6th. It will be consumed in the evening, coming into the first day of unleavened bread in that evening. And if we are observing the sliver, then Pesach is going to be Wednesday in that evening, right? And so whether it's Monday or Wednesday, the fact is that we're here. It's happening. And are we ready? Are we prepared for unleavened bread? Have we done what we need to do to prepare our houses, our hearts, our minds? Have we done what we need to do with our brothers and our sisters? in the offerings, Yahweh says, and Yeshua specifically says, if you're on your way to make an offering and you realize that there's an issue with a brother, leave your offering and go and make things right with your brother. He doesn't even say to take the offering back to the stable. He just says, just leave it and go and fix things with your brother. Something that is so much more significant is the relationships that we have with our brothers and sisters. And Yahweh wants this closeness. He wants this reconciliation. There may be people that we love but don't always get along with. There may be people that we just really don't like, but they're still in our circle. There may be people who we love dearly, but who hurt us regularly. Remember, the concept of forgiveness is not one where all of the hurt and the pain goes away. Forgiveness is actually a process. It takes time. But that time won't start unless you take the initiative to move forward on it. If we're sitting around waiting for someone to come and tell us that we've hurt them, perhaps we aren't examining our lives enough. And on the other aspect of that, is, if we're waiting around for someone to apologize to us, I would encourage us to remind ourselves that Scripture tells us that if a brother has wronged you, let them know. And it's not always easy to put yourself out there and to express your feelings or your thoughts. But without that, we lose what is a fundamental thing in building a community, and that's an ability to communicate. Yahweh's given us His Word, His Torah, His teaching, instruction, guidance, and direction, and He's asked us to communicate with Him, I believe, through it and through interacting with each other. We're here at Pesach. If we look through history, if we look at what has happened during the season of Pesach, it has always been an interesting time, an interesting season. Not too many years back, there were riots in Mitzrayim during Pesach. There have been plagues and famines and wars during Pesach, during unleavened bread. And right now, we are in the midst of this pandemic, and it is affecting us and causing us to do things that we haven't ever done before. We haven't ever had to deal with before. I think that it's absolutely wonderful and amazing and just perfect. This is a season that Yahweh instructs us to go into our homes, in essence. If we look at the very first Exodus, the first Pesach, and we go back to Shemot, to Exodus, and we look at the story of what was happening with the children of Israel in their deliverance, and what led up to them being told to go into their homes, close the door, put the blood on the lintel and the top post, and that the Spirit of the Lord, the Spirit of Yahweh, would pass over, would hop or leap over those homes that had the blood. Death was still there. Death was still at the door. But it's the blood of the Lamb that allows that passing over of death from our homes. And I'm not by any means trying to say that COVID-19 is the Spirit of the Lord or death running through our home, our land during unleavened, leading up to Pesach. I'm not trying to say that. What I'm trying to say is that and by no means, please, I'm not trying to say that if anyone contracts COVID-19 or, has a family member or a friend who does and has to experience that, I don't think that's wonderful. What I think is wonderful is that right now our country, our society, is encouraging us to turn to ourselves, in essence, turn to our own homes, and to really evaluate, have the opportunity to evaluate what's going on inside of our homes. And this is something that it's so easy to forget about often because the world is always open. America is always open. And now that it's not so much, is what I'm saying is wonderful. What's happening in the world, in essence, Yahweh, I believe, is using it to push us into a place where it's that much easier to observe His commandments. Same thing that was happening with the children of Israel during the plagues in Mitzrayim. The first 3 plagues we know the children of Israel experienced, and then we know that they were preserved. They were set aside and kept apart. And the world was experiencing things that they weren't. And if we think about, what is it that allows us to not experience some of the things that the world is going to experience? So let's turn to Vayikra, Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23. Let's do this. Vayikra 23. Yahweh spoke to Moshe again, saying, "Speak to Bnei Israel and say to them, Yahweh's moed, His appointed times, which you shall proclaim as holy convocations. My appointed times are these. For 6 days work may be done, but on the 7th day there is a Shabbat of complete rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work in it. Is a Shabbat unto Yahweh in all your dwellings." Think about that. That's something that I haven't thought about very much until just recently, I think, maybe it is a Shabbat unto Yahweh in all of your dwellings. It's in your dwelling place that it is a Shabbat unto Yahweh. These are the Moed, the Moedim, the appointed times of Yahweh, holy convocations, which you shall proclaim at the times appointed for them. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at twilight, is Yahweh's Pesach. It is Yahweh's passing over. It is His Pesach. Think about how old Yeshua was at the time of His death, burial, and resurrection. You know how many Pesachs He had to go through before that one, or that He got to go through before that one. Think about how much they must have meant to Him, the things that He must have thought of every year, knowing that He was the Lamb. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, verse 5, at twilight is the Lord's Pesach, and this is why we believe so on the 14th day, as the sun is setting, you actually consume the Pesach. Or for us, we focus on Yeshua. Yeshua is our Pesach. He is the Pesach. And so we do not sacrifice him again on Pesach, on the 14th day. We don't offer up a lamb on that day anymore, because our sacrifice, our Pesach, has already been offered. But what we do as we are in our homes is we consume him fully, in essence. We focus on him. We turn to him. Verse 6, then on the 15th day of the same month there is a feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work. But for 7 days you shall present an offering by fire unto Yahweh. On the 7th day is a holy convocation. You shall do no laborious work. So we have the Pesach. And then the first day and the 7th day of unleavened bread are holy convocations. They are days in which no labor is to be performed, no work. So again, for the conjunction, starting the month, it's going to be April 7th and 13th, basically, that are holy days. And for the sliver, it's going to be the 9th and the 15th. No work. And one of the things that we are blessed with when we are able to fellowship like we normally do is we have that opportunity to have that weekly, monthly, whatever reminder of, when Shabbat is, when the new moons are, and the upcoming feasts and the days that are to be observed as holy convocations, as Shabbats. And so, have we done our part to make sure that these are days that we can rest in our homes? That we can allow the people around us rest? Let's turn to Numbers, chapter 9. Thus the Lord spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the 2nd year after they had come out of Mitzrayim, saying, so this is the 2nd year that they've come out from Mitzrayim. These children of Israel, they have already left Mitzrayim. They are in the wilderness. This is the 2nd year. And in verse 2, now let Bnei Israel observe the Pesach at its appointed time. On the 14th day of this month at twilight you shall observe it at its appointed time. You shall observe it according to all its statutes and according to all of its ordinances. So Moshe told Bnei Israel to observe the Pesach. They observed the Pesach in the first month on the 14th day of the month at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that Yahweh had commanded Moshe. So Bnei Israel did. But there were some men who were unclean because of the soul of Adam, because of a dead body. So I want to stop here for a second. And there were men, verse 6, who had been defiled by the soul of Adam, and they had not been able to prepare the Pesach on that day. And they came near before Moshe and before Aharon on that day. And those men said to him, "We are defiled by the soul of Adam, the Nefesh Hadam." Lenefesh Adam, not Ha-Adam. It's Lenefesh Adam, right? So this isn't Ha-Adam. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up. So we've been over this quite a bit, right? So we have Aleph, Dalet, Mem, right? Adam. This is Adam from Bereshit, the first man. And as we move forward, we get Ha-Adam, and this kind of becomes, mankind, right? This becomes humans in essence. And when we have, we don't need to go over all this again. So basically, right, this is what I'm saying is that in this instance here, it's the soul, the nefesh of Adam, without the hay. And so, le nefesh Adam. So these men have been defiled, tameh, made unclean, le nefesh Adam, by or in the way of the nefesh, the soul of Adam. So quite literally, I'm not trying to dismiss the literal, right? So quite literally what we have here is that there was a dead body and they were responsible for taking care of it in some way, shape, form, I would assume, thereby being unclean. And so you had to be clean in order to perform your offering. And so by being unclean, they were unable to make their offering. They were unable to observe the Pesach, right? But Scripture, I believe, always has more for us than just quite the literal. And so these men were defiled, were tameh, made unclean by or in the way of the soul of Adam. And what is that spiritually? What is the soul of Adam? What was Adam's problem? What was it that made Adam unclean? Who ate from the apple? Or apple, excuse me. Yeah, no, wasn't an apple. My bad, I'm sorry. A little bit of the world getting in there. Who ate from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Who ate first? It was Chava, right? So much so that was Adam's excuse. Well, that woman you put here, she took from the tree and gave me fruit to eat. So the sin of Adam, or the soul of Adam's issue, isn't that he went to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, picked some fruit, and ate from it. The soul of Adam was one where he refused to take a role of leadership and responsibility in his home, I believe. He was there at the tree with his wife, with Chava. He was there as she took the fruit and as she ate and as she gave him to eat. It was the instruction from Yahweh that was given to Adam, and it was his responsibility to uphold the word of Yahweh in his home. And so I believe that some of the ways that we can be infected or become tameh, unclean, as a result of being in the, or operating in the way or toward le nefesh, the soul of Adam, is to fail to walk out the instructions that Yahweh has given us and to accept that responsibility and that authority. And we look a little bit at what's going on around us right now. and it's real easy to say, well, it's Pesach, we're supposed to retreat. In the plagues leading up to the Exodus, specifically in one instance, there was light in the homes of the children of Israel, while the whole rest of the world was darkness. And if the whole world is in darkness, and yet there is light in one home, where do you think the world's focus will turn? I talked last week about the sign of Yonah. And Yeshua brought up that it is a wicked generation that looks for a sign, and the only sign that will be given is the sign of Yonah. And what was that sign, right? Was the sign of Yonah the message to Nineveh? Or was the sign of Yonah the fact that he refused to deliver that message? And that he was grumpy about the fact that when he did deliver the message, the children, the people of Nineveh repented. So I believe in part we have a responsibility to share with the world the concept of repentance, of turning from our sins and returning to Yahweh. We are to be a light to the world around us. Inside of our tabernacle, inside of our us as a body of believers specifically, and also but within each and every one of us individually is supposed to be a fire perpetually burning, upon which offerings can be made. And I challenge us to make sure that things in our lives are pleasing and acceptable unto Yahweh to the point where that altar is ready to receive the offering. Are we tamei, possibly, right now, because of the soul of Adam? We have time before Pesach, before unleavened bread, to right ourselves, in essence, to turn back to Yeshua. We're in a time right now where we're not meeting as a community on Pesach or during unleavened bread. I mean, here we are now, I'm talking to a camera, and it's a bunch of empty chairs, except for David, God bless him. And this is kind of where we are right now. And there are a lot of churches that are in trouble right now because they're saying, you know what, the government can't tell us that we can't meet, we're going to keep meeting. Yahweh gives us an instruction in His Word to be obedient to the authorities placed above us. And we talk about how, that's as long as you aren't going against the will or the word of Yahweh in so doing, then yes, by all means. And so by Yahweh's grace, this is a time where we have the ability through social media to interact in the ways that we are. We meet before service and we fellowship with each other via, is it Zoom or whatever other platform we may be using, and we're able to see each other and talk to each other and ask how each other are doing and pray with each other and interact with each other. And we're expanding our time on that as we move forward now. We're not just going to be doing announcements, but we're actually going to be spending more time, with a little bit of fellowship in there. And so, at any rate, we're not meeting right now. and in person, but we are meeting virtually, and we are, I pray, staying connected with each other individually, through whatever other means those may be for us. And I pray that if Yahweh puts someone on your heart during this time, that you would reach out to them and not let that moment pass. So at any rate, as a community, we're not meeting for Pesach. And it's usually, like most communities, a relatively, big, fun day for us. And so we have right now, the plan is that we'll meet on Pesach Sheni, on the second Pesach. And we will fellowship together at that time, as long as the restrictions have been lifted. And we'll keep in touch with that as we go forward. But nevertheless, especially for Pesach, this is a time where Yahweh says that this can be observed in your homes. There are instructions that say, especially during the first Pesach, there should be enough people in your home to consume a lamb, and it takes a lot of people to eat a lamb. But our lamb is Yeshua. And it could take the whole world, every generation, from the beginning of time till his return, to consume that one lamb. And so unless you are inviting all of them to the same gathering, I think we're going to be okay in our homes this time. I think that we can make it a very special, intimate, personal time, a very, personal Pesach. Large communal gatherings for Pesach is not really the norm in Scripture. There was the gathering at the temple for the offering, but then you would take that offering back to your homes and consume it. And so I pray that's where our focus is in our homes this season. One, that we right ourselves and our hearts and our minds and rectify broken relationships and spend time in prayer and petition and focusing on Yahweh, cleaning out our... So at any rate, we got to look for a little bit of a rabbit trail there, but back to verse 6 in chapter 9 of Numbers again, Bamidbar. And there were men who had been defiled by the soul of Adam, and they had not been able to prepare the Pesach on that day. And they came near before Moshe and before Aharon on that day. And those men said to him, "We are defiled by the soul of Adam. Why are we restrained so as not to be able to offer the offering of Yahweh in this appointed season, in the midst of Bnei Israel?" And Moshe said to them, "You wait, so that I may hear what Yahweh will command concerning you." And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to Bnei Israel, saying, if any man of you, of your congregation, shall be tameh, unclean by reason of soul, or be in a distant journey or way. So if anyone is unclean by reason of a soul or in a distant way, he shall keep the Pesach, yet he shall keep the Pesach to Yahweh. In the second month, on the 14th day at dusk, they shall keep it. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs, and they shall leave none of it until morning, nor break a bone of it, according to all the statute of the Pesach. They shall keep it. But the man that is clean and is not on a journey and has failed to prepare the Pesach, even that person shall be cut off from his people, because he did not bring the offering of Yahweh in the appointed season. That man shall bear his own sin. And if a stranger, so stop there real quick. So, guys, even though we're meeting for Pesach Sheni, for the second Pesach in the second month, on the 14th day of the second month, we're going to try. That's our goal. Is, if we can, we will. Don't let that be a reason why you don't observe Pesach this week. The whole world being Tameh is not a reason for us to be Tameh. We have the opportunity to be Tahor, to be clean, to be prepared and ready, to observe the Pesach, to eat it with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs, and to rest on the first and seventh day of unleavened bread. Let's not be cut off from our people spiritually because we are cut off physically. The things that are keeping us apart physically right now is not a reason to be cut off from our people spiritually. Can't emphasize this enough, I don't think. We trudge forward. We press on. We observe Pesach and unleavened bread. We keep fellowshipping and interacting with each other by the blessing of cell phones, letters. Amanda mentioned during our meeting earlier, everyone that was there, that we've got a letter from Tova and Almos's cousin. They're writing letters to each other. And I remember Amanda telling stories when she worked at UNC about how a lot of the kids there, the young adults there, didn't know how to write a letter. They didn't know how to address an envelope. And she worked in the mailroom, and so quite often some of the mail that would come through there, she would have to go find that person or that department and fix things because people had lost the ability to communicate in that way. And so I just simply say, write a letter, send a card, make a phone call, send an email, get on FaceCrack, whatever form of communication you choose. Don't lose touch. And don't start fellowshipping with people that you probably shouldn't, And don't start watching shows that you shouldn't watch. And don't neglect some of our responsibilities because we're scared or bored. This isn't a time to fall into despair or to sin. This is a time to turn to Yahweh, to turn to Yeshua and to be gracious and thankful for the offering that he has made and for us to accept it. Let's turn to Devarim. We're going to keep going on this. Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 16. Observe the month of Aviv, the first month of the year, and celebrate the Pesach unto Yahweh your Elohim, for in the month of Aviv Yahweh your Elohim brought you out from Mitzrayim by night. You shall sacrifice the Pesach to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock of the herd in the place where Yahweh chooses to establish his name. Where has Yahweh chosen for his name to reside? Not at the Hebrew house. It's not. It's not in some temple that they're trying to build in Israel. Sorry, it's not. And though there will be offerings there eventually, Yahweh has chosen and has always chosen for his name to dwell within his people. Verse 3, you shall not eat leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat with unleavened bread, the bread of affliction. Now remember I think it was last week, I said, we're supposed to get all of the chametz and the seor out of our homes, and we can go OCD on that. We can get rid of toothpaste and all kinds of stuff in our homes, right? Or we can go like super the opposite direction and just simply get rid of any loaves of bread out of our homes. And so regardless of what level of observance to this we have, or what our beliefs are, we know that spiritually this leaven and this seor are things in our hearts and our minds, in our feelings and our emotions, our thoughts, that we are supposed to cleanse out of our lives, right? These things that cause us to sin, these things that cause us to rebel, to walk in opposition to the will of Yahweh. And sometimes, unfortunately, these things can be people, they can be things, they can be mindsets, and the instruction is to cleanse them from our homes for 7 days. And allow a period of time for the home, in essence, for our hearts and minds to rest from that leaven. So, we talked about what it takes to make leavened bread, right? And that kneading the dough and that mixing together a little bit of leavened dough with a lot of unleavened dough, and making a whole lump of leavened dough. And so, with as sparse as some things are in the stores right now, don't let it be an excuse to not walk in obedience to Yahweh. Because even though we're supposed to cleanse our hearts and our minds, our bodies and our homes spiritually, we're also supposed to walk it out physically. So the fact that there isn't a lot of stuff on the shelves isn't, I believe, an excuse to keep a loaf of bread on your shelf. Put a little bit of dough together with some water, throw it in the oven. Don't give it time to rise. Go buy a box of matzah. That shelf's probably relatively full, right? So let's keep on in Devarim. Sorry, back to where we were. Verse 3, you shall not eat leavened bread with it 7 days. You shall eat with it unleavened bread, the bread of affliction. For you came out of Eretz Mitzrayim in haste, so that you may remember all the days of your life, the day when you came out of Eretz Mitzrayim, the land of Egypt. For 7 days no leaven shall be seen with you in all of your territory, and none of the flesh which you sacrifice on the evening of the first day shall remain overnight until morning. You are not allowed to sacrifice the Pesach in any of your towns which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. But at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to establish his name, you shall sacrifice the Pesach in the evening at sunset, at the time you came out of Mitzrayim. You shall cook and eat it in the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses. In the morning you are to return to your tents. 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a solemn assembly to Yahweh your Elohim. You shall do no work on it. You shall count 7 weeks for yourself. You shall begin to count 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the standing grain. And then you shall celebrate the Feast of Weeks. You shall celebrate the Feast of Weeks unto Yahweh your Elohim with a tribute of a freewill offering of your hand, which you shall give just as Yahweh your Elohim blesses you. So think about this. Think about the awesomeness of this. Pesach is a beginning. Unleavened bread is a beginning. And it is a beginning of a counting, right? So we observe 7 days of unleavened bread, and we also begin counting 7 weeks unto a celebration. And so I say let's look forward to that celebration. 7 weeks. I have a feeling that in 7 weeks we'll all be able to celebrate. One way or another. It's just my thought. But let's not lose sight. Let's not lose focus. Let's not lose count. Let's not lose count. Verse 9 again, you shall count 7 weeks for yourself. You shall begin to count 7 weeks from the first time you begin to put the sickle to the standing grain. All right, last scripture. Let's go to the book of Acts, chapter 20. Let's think about some of the things that were going on during Pesach. We've been talking about the Exodus from Mitzrayim. We've talked about some of the things that happened in the wilderness from Mitzrayim into the Promised Land. We don't have time to get into things that happened during the children of Israel's time in the Promised Land, though there are some awesome things in there, and I wish we could go into Ezekiel and stuff, but and so there were times when the children of Israel would in essence return to Yahweh and have the opportunity to observe Pesach, and it was a huge celebration, a wonderful time. And I pray, maybe next year we can have that kind of a mentality, that kind of a returning. During the time of Yeshua, it was a pretty grim time, and right after his death and burial and resurrection, Yeshua was brought up on to the stage, if you will, and given the children of Israel, the Jews were given the opportunity to let him go. And they chose Barabbas instead. A little bit of fall feast imagery within Pesach there. We've talked about that a lot in the past. And then going forward from there, let's just look at an example here in Acts chapter 20. We're going to start in verse 1. After the uproar had ceased, Shaul sent for the disciples, and when he had exhorted them and taken his leave of them, he left to go to Macedonia. When he had gone through those disciples and had given them much exhortation, he came to Greece. And there he spent 3 months. And when a plot was formed against him by the Jews, as he was about to set sail for Syria, he decided to return through Macedonia. And he was accompanied by Sopater of Berea, the son of Pyrrhus, and by Aristarchus and Secundus of the Thessalonians, and Gaius and Derbe and Timothy, and Tychius and Trophimus of Asia. But these had gone on ahead and were waiting for us at Troas. We sailed from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread and came to them at Troas within 5 days. And there we stayed 7 days. On the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread, Shaul began talking to them, intending to leave the next day, and he prolonged his message until midnight. There were many lamps in the upper room where we were gathered together, and there was a young man named Eutychus sitting on the windowsill, sinking into a deep sleep as Shaul kept on talking. Okay, so look at what's leading up to this, right? There's a group of people who travel together, yet most of them had already gone on ahead. And Shaul was in a place where he decided to stay through unleavened bread before traveling. And after unleavened bread, he began to travel again. And then we get into this concept of, so first of all, okay, back up just a little bit. First of all, he's being pursued and chased and at every turn, right? There's a plot to capture him, to push the message down. And Shaul stays during unleavened bread, and that's kind of, I think, where we are at. We need to take this time of unleavened bread and, I mean, really just retreat into our homes, into our own fellowships, and focus on Yahweh, and let whatever is going on in the world, just let it go. Turn to Yahweh. Focus on his feasts. And as soon as unleavened bread is over, look at what we see this example here, is that they began to meet and fellowship and to teach as they normally did, but they took that time to rest. And so what happens coming out of this, of unleavened bread, is this story that we all probably know pretty well about a man sitting in a windowsill while Shaul was teaching. And I know sometimes I feel like Shaul, because sometimes some of you fall asleep. Perhaps I'm just that boring, or monotone, or whatever the case is. At any rate, Shaul's teaching, he's just going on and on and on and on. And so there's one guy sitting in the windowsill, falls asleep, falls out of the window. And so, I guess, in a way, what I'm saying is this is kind of what we have to look forward to. There's some extended teachings coming out of unleavened bread. Maybe. Maybe not, maybe. But at any rate, I think that our focus should be, coming out of unleavened bread, that we have an opportunity to really just start sharing what our hope is in, who our hope is in, and our lifestyle that we have been blessed with through the instructions of Yahweh in his Torah. This is a lifestyle that's supposed to be full of tahor and not tameh. You know, biblically what would be happening in these days that we're in right now is that those who became tameh would be isolated and treated, and those who were tahor would continue to function in society. And so right now the world is upside down from a biblical principle. Our whole country is, in essence, being treated as if we are tameh. And we are awaiting the opportunity to interact as a society again. So I think that's another wonderful thing that's come out of everything in this, is that, look, one, this is the world reacting to something, and it's giving us an opportunity to focus on Yahweh, to be still and to trust Him. But two, when the whole world is shutting down, sort of, instead of just isolating those who need treatment and help, we have the opportunity to operate a little differently. I'm not telling all of us to go out and start gallivanting around in the streets or to start fellowshipping in large groups of people. On the contrary, what I'm saying is that we need to focus on the concept of tahor, the clean, and that right now maybe it's a good thing to take this time to stay in our homes a little bit and focus on our relationship with the Lord, with Yahweh, and with the people that we're close to. Build these relationships with our inner circles. Don't forget to rectify and reconcile relationships that are broken or hurt. Don't forget to, in this season, sometimes it may be the time to cut off things from our lives or people. That's not our goal, I don't believe, but I think that sometimes it's a necessity. Try to rectify things. Try to cleanse our homes, our hearts and our minds. Tell you, turn it off. Here in a second. All right, so let's close with prayer. Avinu Shabbat, our Father in heaven, Yahweh, B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, your Son, our Messiah, we bless you, we praise you, we thank you. Thank you for the opportunities that you bring into our life, for the love that you have for us. Help us to share that love with the people around us. Help us to focus on the clean and not the unclean. Help us to remember your instructions in your word to, as sinners, to wash our hands, as holy vessels to remember that we are to be pure, to fill that which is in our eyesight with purity, which comes into our ears with truth, what comes out of our mouth to be clean and right, edifying and blessing. Help us to remember to be there for each other, to be encouraging and strong. Help us to not forget you, Lord. Help us to focus on you, on your truth, through your word, with your grace. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Lehitraot.